action. Let's march on Washington. We want prayer back in school. This is war cry. Cameras, memorials in every corner in our neighborhood. Who died this weekend? Oh no, not Miss Martha's grandson. This is war cry. He was only 16. His brother died last year. He was only 13. This is war cry. We the people. We're the elected officials. This is war cry. We need the church. Where's the church? Only on Sundays. Get to the streets, church. We need you out there. This is war cry. Girl, be gone. Boy, be gone. Mothers crying. Fathers being locked up. Welcome to our reality. Identity crisis. This is war cry. Oh, they're trying to remove our history off the textbook. Oh, critical race theory? It makes them feel bad. It's our reality. Fake reality shows. We want the real truth. Stay woke. This is war cry. HBCUs under attack. This is war cry. Equal pay for what we do. We want a reparation. This is war cry. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Wait a minute. Is that somebody else they're burying that looks like us? Only 12. This is war cry. Oh, let us come together and pray for our young people. Pray for our communities. Pray for our schools. Pray for our churches. Pray that the government gives us what we need, a fair opportunity. This is war cry. Home of the brave. Land of the free. Who's free? Our men are locked up. This is war cry. Hashtag mothers against gang violence. Hashtag fathers who love their sons. Hashtag what would Jesus do? This is war cry.
I know who goes before me. I know who stays behind. The God of Israel's army is always by my side.
This is war cry. We're on the wall crying out for our children, our communities, our schools, our churches, our families. This is war cry. Welcome to our reality. Gun violence. Chicago, Philly, Detroit, New York, Atlanta, just to name a few. Our black children are dying day by day. This is war cry. Police brutality. Hands up! Don't move. I can't breathe. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. Hashtag All Lives Matter to Christ. This is war cry. Drugs, rape, mass shootings, school violence. This is war cry. Galvanizing people to pray for our children and to take action. Let's march on Washington. We want prayer back in school. This is war cry. Cameras, memorials in every corner in our neighborhood. Who died this weekend? Oh no, not Miss Martha's grandson. This is war cry. He was only 16. His brother died last year. He was only 13. This is war cry. We the people. We're the elected officials. This is war cry. We need the church. Where's the church? Only on Sundays. Get to the streets, church. We need you out there. This is war cry. Girl, be gone. Boy, be gone. Mothers crying. Fathers being locked up. Welcome to our reality. Identity crisis. This is war cry. Oh, they're trying to remove our history off the textbook. Oh, critical race theory? It makes them feel bad. It's our reality. Fake reality shows. We want the real truth. Stay woke. This is war cry. HBCUs under attack. This is war cry. Equal pay for what we do. We want a reparation. This is war cry. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Wait a minute. Is that somebody else they're burying that looks like us? Only 12. This
Copyright disclaimer: under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. No copyright infringement intended. All rights belong to their respective owners.
This is War Cry. We're on the walls crying out for our children, our communities, our schools, our churches, our families. This is War Cry. Welcome to our reality. Gun violence, Chicago, Philly, Detroit, New York, Atlanta, just to name a few. Our black children are dying day by day. This is War Cry. Police brutality. Hands up! Don't move. I can't breathe. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. Hashtag All Lives Matter to Christ. This is War Cry. Drugs, rape, mass shootings, school violence. This is War Cry. Galvanizing people to pray for our children and to take action. Let's march on Washington. We want prayer back in school. This is War Cry. Candles, memorials in every corner in our neighborhood. Who died this weekend? Oh no, not Miss Martha's grandson. This is War Cry. He was only 16. His brother died last year. He was only 13. This is War Cry. We the people. We're the elected officials. This is War Cry. We need the church. Where's the church? Only on Sundays. Get to the streets, church. We need you out there. This is War Cry. Girl, be gone. Boy, be gone. Mothers crying. Fathers being locked up. Welcome to our reality. Identity crisis. This is War Cry. Oh, they're trying to remove our history off the textbook. Oh, critical race theory? It makes them feel bad. It's our reality. Fake reality shows. We want the real truth. Stay woke. This is War Cry. HBCUs under attack. This is War Cry. Equal pay for what we do. We want a reparation. This is War Cry. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Wait a minute. Is that somebody else they're burying that looks like us? Only 12. This is War Cry. Oh, let us come together and pray for our young people, pray for our communities, pray for our schools, pray for our churches, pray that the government gives us what we need, a fair opportunity. This is War Cry, home of the brave, land of the free. Who's free? Our men are locked up. This is War Cry. Hashtag mothers against gang violence. Hashtag fathers who love their sons. Hashtag what would Jesus do? This is War Cry.
I know who goes before me. I know who stays behind. The God of Israel's army is always by my side.
Back again with another great show. You know, and it's really not a show. It's some facts of life that we really need to be aware of. There are things going around that we've been so distracted from looking at other things that we can't get to the main thing. This is War Cry. We're not politically corrected, but we're Christ directed. This is War Cry. War Cry for our children, War Cry for our communities, War Cry for our schools, War Cry to galvanize us back together again, War Cry for our government. Our War Cry this week is War Cry for our women that are being beat up in domestic violence situations, Black women, women of color. War Cry for our missing Black children. This is a clarion call, War Cry. You can bring my guest on the line right now because we've got an exciting show for you today. This is War Cry. This is War Cry. And it's time for us to actually begin to cry out for our young people because this is war cry. This is war cry. And if you think that it's not time to cry out for our young people, our women, then guess what? We got so many systems working against us. This is war cry. And we're going to go right into it. We're going to talk about domestic violence. We're going to talk about girls, black girls gone missing. I see we have our guest on. So I'm going to start with Danielle Williams. Then I'm going to girls. Val, I appreciate you guys. I'm joining your organization. And then we're going to go to Dr. Edward Johnson and Dr. Gregory Johnson just for a short overview of who we have on the broadcast. All right, Danielle, step right in.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning to all the panelists that we've seen for the past few weeks. So, my name is Danielle Williams, and I'm the coordinator of Connect Faith in New York City. We're part of an organization called Connect NYC. And so at Connect NYC, we work with our communities to address and ultimately prevent domestic violence from occurring. And so in my work, I work with faith traditions, a variety of faith traditions from across NYC doing that work. And so today I just wanted to share a little bit about domestic violence, especially as it happens in our communities. Um, I'm actually going to lift up the name of a college friend, Melanie Dunn, who was murdered by her abusive ex-boyfriend after leaving him. And when I think back, these are the things that I saw in my earlier years that ultimately contributed to the work that I do today. So when we talk about intimate partner violence, we're talking about the actual or the threatened physical, sexual, psychological, verbal, spiritual, and economic abuse that impairs the ability of the abused person to function in a self-determining and healthy way, or it causes the person to be afraid. It's ultimately a pattern of coercive control, and it's about one partner having power and control over the other. Sometimes we see it as, oh, domestic violence is about one partner using drugs, anger issues. That's like the state's core focus is, oh, get them in anger management. But anger actually isn't the issue. It's about having power and control over one partner. And so when we look at domestic violence, how are Black women impacted? So I
Okay,
have,
Danielle, let's stop right there. And we're going to go back to you. I want Girl Val to come in and just introduce themselves.
Hi,
All
good.
right, come on in.
Good
Dawn,
morning.
come on in.
Hi, good morning. My name is Dawn Rowe. I'm the president and CEO of GirlVal, and I also oversee a national task force for missing and murdered women and girls of color. We are in New York State. Our work at GirlVal is centered on focusing on girls who've been impacted by the foster care, the juvenile justice system, which of course relates to poverty. And so we work on Rikers Island juvenile facilities. We work in foster care agencies. We've done everything from remove girls from sex trafficking houses, making sure that young people have shelter, as well as helping them to reunite them with their families if their children are enter into the foster care system. And so the work that we do is very near and dear to us, and we want to make sure that we're able to continue this work and do so in a way where we can save girls and women in our community. Last but not least, we also have um, a big event coming up on November 3rd, which is our candlelight visual that's happening for missing and murdered women and girls of color. It's going to be at City Hall Park, and we would love for you all to join us. We're looking for speakers. We're looking for, of course, people to attend. It's going to be at 5:45 p.m. And we'll talk about that throughout this call. And if you don't mind, Elder Montgomery, I'd like to pass it over to Bo, who is our program associate.
Most certainly, welcome, Bo, to War Cry.
Thank you. My name is Bo Pelletier. I work for GirlVal, specifically for the task force for missing murdered girls of color. I am the Native American representation for my people, as we are a fairly closed-off community. So I hope to kind of be the spokesperson for my people and get our message across. Thank you.
And I want to say something. That population has been underserved and they don't have a voice. I am glad you're here because a lot of missing girls, it's like I heard about something in Washington, D.C., that Washington wouldn't even go look, the state wouldn't even go look for the girls because they were on the tribal grounds. It was actually, and so I am looking forward to you telling me that because it's different governmental systems that they have to work across. Just say a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we have our own police system, and due to the fact that we do not want the outside sources
Now let me
as
go back. Let me go back. Let me ask a question. What do you mean when you say we have our own police system? Explain that.
yeah, so I'm Navajo, and on specifically the Navajo reservation, we have our own police force that investigates various crimes and issues, just like any other community, except on the reservation, and it's exclusively for the tribe and the Native American community. So we do not have or allow, I should say, any other resources to come on the land, just because it's sacred and we want to be as independent as possible. Because obviously, for hundreds of years, we haven't really had that capability.
Yes, and that makes it very complicated, Bo, when you're looking for someone. Because if you report them outside of the reservation, the government really doesn't like to even get involved in it because they don't look at it as an issue that belongs to us. Even though someone could have kidnapped them and brought them over into outside of your area, but the government doesn't want to do anything. Why is that?
So there is an extreme lack of care for the indigenous community, period. There always has been. I have a lot of personal experiences, like my cousin going missing outside the reservation. Like a couple of cousins, actually. One recently, last year, they found a lot of things and never found her. It's just a lot of it's always been that way. You give us our land, but then you kind of micromanage it, and you're showing us that you're still in power. You're showing us that you still have control over us, and it's not going to change. Never probably going to change for at least the foreseeable future, for as long as I'm alive, and that is what they're trying to show us, that they don't care. There's just a lack of resources. We don't have a lot of money. The A lot of the populace of the community, unfortunately, is under the use of paraphernalia such as drugs, alcoholism. A lot of those things run rampant. A lot of children, especially young females, are in foster care and they run away from foster care. They talk to a guy online, and so there's a lot of pain and suffering within the community that is not spoken about. But because they don't care, that is the bottom line. Is police do not care about us, and they probably never will within my lifetime. And that is just the factual truth about the situation.
Thank you so much. And I am so glad that you're here because you can tell us about different things because I understood that they have, like the reservations have their own governmental system and the government outside of that will not even come in on your property to do anything. Bo, you want to say something? Say they won't even come on your property if someone is domestically being violated or anything like that because of the tribal agreements. And I am so glad you're here. I salute you today for your work and for speaking up because you need to give a voice. We must. This is War Cry, and we're going to give a voice. Okay, Dr. Edwin Lee Johnson, just a 5-minute overview of who you are, and then Dr. Gregory.
Good morning to all the panelists, of course, to you, Valerie. It's certainly good to be here with you. I'm a husband of a wonderful lady, Stacy, and have 2 daughters and 4 granddaughters. So I'm extremely interested in this topic. And that's why I'm here. My forte, of course, is writing. I'm a pastor, have been for 4 decades now, and written 27 books, currently writing 2 more. But my signature series is my latest book, and that's The Autopsy of Slavery and the Bible. I'm actually going to be doing a scholarly review of that material on the 26th of this month at the new International African American Museum here in Charleston. It's a $100 million project. And so the event's been sold out at this point. but I'm going to be there talking about this material that the Holy Spirit's given me for the body of Christ, and is pertinent to every city in America and across the world. We got to deal with racism because it is the original sin of America, and slavery was used to dehumanize Black people. And had they not used the Bible to do it and call themselves Christians at the same time, I would not have been in this particular fight, because when sinners do stuff, that's what they're supposed to do. But you don't get the right to call yourself a Christian and then using the Bible to violate everything the Bible is about. So my assignment is to write this information prophetically, put it in writing, and put it in the face of everybody who it pertains to. And that's the entire Christian church in America and across the world. Believe it or not, people in pretty much every nation across this planet is practicing racism against Black people because of the white supremacy social construct in America and chattel slavery that took place in this country that has dehumanized us. And we have been fighting this system, just like this young lady just talked about on the reservation. Believe it or not, the Native American and the Negroes in America have the same common history. This is a message that most of us are unaware of, but it's a historical fact, and I'm showing it to you in my latest book. It's titled The Autopsy of Slavery and the Bible. So we're dissecting what actually took place in America, what powerful Christian men today, particularly white men, don't want to have this discussion because they are afraid that their grips on power in this country is slipping away. And of course, unfortunately, we got a lot of Black powerful men who doesn't want to discuss this topic because they don't know it and they're too proud to say it. So it's my assignment. I'm doing it with a lot of passion, because when you've been practicing for half a century, you get good at it. And I dumped it all in the book, and it's ready for the world. So every listener on this panel, and of course that's listening to us overall, you have to get this. I got some stories to tell you. This book just came out in January, and I've got some mesmerizing stories to tell you that this book is generating right on up to this past weekend. So I can talk up the whole hour, so I'll stop there.
Okay, let me ask you a question, Bishop.
Right.
You see the two hot subjects we have here, domestic violence. And even as we talk to Danielle, she goes out and she talks about domestic violence in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have girls gone missing, and we see even the racism that we always knew exists, even on the reservation. But you is here to bring that out, because as you say, we are one people together, and we always we say and we know what we faced. But can you imagine what they faced on the reservation? And we are one, connected together. Our blood is running together. So we need to bring these things up, because we got to bring them to the church front too, because it's a part of us getting to know who we are. So what do you think about these two subjects being taught in the church?
Well, the church has been a bedrock for the Black community from the time Black folk got released off of the plantation. It has been the primary source for us to go to get our real education, because the educational system in America is not designed to educate us. It's designed to indoctrinate us into the American culture. So we've learned our real history from church culture that we've been able to get into, and that's what we need to go back to, because over the last 2-3 decades we've allowed sports figures and Hollywood to distract us, and we're looking to all the wrong places for our leadership. We've got to get back to the church. And I blame the pastors for the most part, because we've become so disjointed. We have no relationship for the most part with pastors and communities all over America. And I hold that we got to stop just limiting our connection with Black people. The kingdom of God is not about a color, and Blackness is a knee-jerk reaction to whiteness. So we got to see the whole spectrum. We are God's people, and we've got to get this right across the board in our community formulate a powerful coalition so that we can combat evil across the board. Because this
Let me cut in. Let me cut in.
yeah.
What about domestic violence in the church?
Well,
Our brothers beating up our sisters in the church.
it's pervasive in churches, and that's unfortunate. And that's why we've got to have some kind of networking going on so people can get this information out. We've been hiding a lot of this stuff. A lot of women who are abused by men are afraid to talk about it because of the reprisal of them coming out with it. But somewhere down the line, we've got to formulate a situation where they can get comfortable and not feel like they're going to be backlash, from the very people that they're trusting with the information. Because a lot of women, older women, in fact, over the years, they would tell the young girls, don't say anything about it, just hush, because you're going to make this one look bad, that one look bad. Sometimes it could be their own daddy molesting these children. So it's a lot going on, and the church is going to have to.
So we got a hot subject. Dr. Johnson, just come on, just give a 2-minute interview because we want to jump in.
Well, praise the Lord. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I am excited and my brain is working overdrive from what I've just heard so far, especially from the young Navajo sister. And with regards to domestic violence, I have been dealing with domestic violence from a clinical way for more than 32 years. Every other patient I had to see as a clinical therapist had a history of domestic violence. And, it's something that I took very to heart, and it's something I took very seriously. And you mentioned the church. Yes, there was plenty of domestic violence in the church. I grew up with it, seeing it. I remember as a young man, it was something that was spoken of, and but nobody talked about it. They would whisper about it, and sometimes the ladies would even giggle about it. Even I remember the missionaries in the church used to go and talk about, well, did you hear what happened to Sister So and So? Did you look at Mother So and So's eyes? Did you see that black eye that she tried to put that makeup on her face? I remember that. And then I will share something with you. In 1992, I knew a minister who was well known and preaching in my church, and he used to beat his wife. And his wife was a very good friend of mine, and she used to show me the marks on her back and on her legs, and she'd be crying. So I went to her husband at the service one Sunday. I said, Reverend so-and-so, I respect you as a minister per se, but I disrespect you as a man. I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen to me when I tell you. If you beat your wife one more time, I'm going to do something to you that I'm going to have to ask God to forgive me for. I said, do you understand me? And he went to saying, oh, do you know who I am? And if I beat my wife, she deserves it. I know what she's doing. God gave her to me. So if I need to beat her, I said, no. God did not give her to you to beat. If you hit her again, this is what I'm going to do. And I did that. And I'm gonna leave it at that.
These are some of the things. These are some of the things that we're going to talk about. Now, also, when we talk about domestic violence, I cannot leave out, because Dr. Johnson has had some experience with men being violated by women.
Yes, I have.
So I needed to bring that up as well. And when we talk about the reservations and the Navajo Indians, we must know that our culture is in line with their culture. And for us to leave them out of our history, we know the violations that took place with them. I tell all the little stories. America, Columbus discovered America, but you and I both know that's a lie.
Amen.
That's a lie. So we're going to get to some hard truths here. Now, before we even give it back to Danielle, I want us just to take a moment and just look at this film. Engineer, put the film on. Then we're going to give it to Danielle.
I got flowers today. I got flowers today. It wasn't my birthday or any other special day. We had our first argument last night. He said a lot of cruel things to me that really hurt. I know he was sorry and didn't mean the things that he said, because I got flowers today.
I got flowers today. I got flowers today. It wasn't our anniversary or any other special day. Last night, he threw me into a wall and started to choke me. It seemed like a nightmare. I couldn't believe it was real. I woke up sore and bruised all over. I know he must be sorry because he sent me flowers today.
I got flowers today. I got flowers today. It wasn't Mother's Day or any special day. Last night he beat me up again, and it was much worse than other times. If I leave, what will I do? How will I take care of my kids? What about money? I'm afraid and scared to leave him, but he must be sorry because he sent me flowers today.
I got flowers today.
I got flowers today. Today was a very special day. It was the day of my funeral. Last night, he finally killed me. He beat me to death. If only I had gathered enough courage and strength to leave him, I would not have gotten flowers today.
This poem is dedicated to all the victims and survivors of domestic violence. You ask, why did she leave? But we ask,
Why did he hit?
We cannot hear you.
I'm sorry about that. You know, we asked the question about why didn't she leave? But guess what? Why did he hit her? That's the question. Bill, before we even go to Danielle, do me a favor. Bill, how did that film make you feel? How did that make you feel?
As somebody that has experienced that sort of thing firsthand, it hits, it hits. And I think having experienced family members and hearing about it, like experiencing it in person, it hurts because it brings up memories. And I think that is going to continue happening. It's going to continue. It's not going to end. And I think the more that people keep having babies on the reservation, because it's a production of life, right? Everybody is going to reproduce at one point or another. More people that get together. A lot of the time, young people get together at a very young age, or a young girl will run away and be with a guy that is, older, and she will become impregnated or whatnot or whatever on the reservation. What's going to happen to the child? What's going to happen to her? There is a lot of domestic violence on the reservation. Hearing about it from family members firsthand, like experiencing it when I would visit as a child. I would visit for 1 week, and let's say I was staying with my aunt. My uncle would like profusely beat her. He hit me a couple of times, and then I would stop visiting. That's when I stopped visiting. When I showed back up to my father, like covered in cuts because he had tried to like cut me with like a beer bottle or whatever. He was a very violent person, and a good amount of people on the reservation are like that, and some to no fault of their own. There is so much pain it's almost palpable when you step on. If there isn't a festivity going on, the festivities is what keeps us going. But if you are stepping on a quiet day, quiet hot day on the desert, you can feel the pain like radiating in the air. It's always going to be there. It's never going to go anywhere. So it's very personal because
Now, just one question. Now, even though we know that, supposing for some reason that someone is being violated on the reservation, and they called the police 911. What happens? The police, the government authority cannot cross over on tribal property, or can they cross over if it's a crime? What happens?
So I primarily, I lived there for a little while years ago, but I haven't lived there since. So from what I understand, I hear a lot about it through family members, but obviously as the spokesperson for my people, I hear a lot. They don't do anything. They can't do anything. They don't do anything because they are under, like, they're subjugated by the law to not be able to do anything. Period. Like,
Now,
period.
another question. If a girl goes missing, and Danielle, I'm going to get to you. If a girl goes missing on the reservation and they know that you are a representative of Girl Vows, would they contact you, and would you then attempt to look for that that the girl that's going missing from the reservation? How would you do that?
It would be my honor to be contacted to be able to help, but as of yet, that has not been the case. It would I would be angry enough to turn that anger into something productive. So if someone were to contact me through Gorval, um, I do think I would do my best to help as much as I possibly can.
Now, we have no statistics of how many children or girls that's going missing from the reservations because that data is not given to us. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
Okay, so there's so many that went missing we don't even know. Okay, I just wanted to get that in. This is Beau. She's from the Navajo tribe. We are so glad to celebrate her and for her to be here because we are all connected as one. Now we're going right back to domestic violence, and then we'll go back to girl vow. Domestic violence. Come on, Danielle, jump in because when we think about it, in the Black community, it's been a don't
Mhm.
tell nobody that daddy hit mama. Don't tell what stays in our house, what goes on here stays in here. So we've been like, shh, and won't make up about it. And what has that done? It has perpetuated the sons to grow up and be violent against their wives and girlfriends. And it has perpetuated the young girls when they grow up to be women to, it's okay because he still loves me. Danielle Williams, at you now.
Yeah, and thank you, Bu, for sharing. And you can see the parallels with the African American community and the Indigenous American community in terms of, one thing is domestic violence happens in all of our communities, whether you Black, white, Latino, Asian, rich as well, poor. Some people think, oh, this is just a low income issue. Oh no, this transcends income. It transcends education, it transcends geography, right? Then put and domestic violence itself is an oppression because of the nature it's of one partner having power and control over the other. Okay? Now add on living in a white supremacist system on top of all of that, and it creates a lot of challenges for those Black people who are experiencing domestic violence. And I wanted to add on, to the video. I was like, man, Elder Montgomery, you had to play that before you asked me to speak. Jeez. But thank you for sharing it. And I just wanted to add on to the last sentence when she said, if only I had enough courage. But I have to flip that on us. If only we had enough courage to stand in the gap for women and men who are experiencing domestic violence. If we had the courage as community to take that stigma off, if we had the courage to not say, don't tell nobody, if we had the courage to believe them when they share it with us, that plays a very, very significant role. And people often ask, well, why don't they leave? The question is more so, what are the challenges to leaving? What are the challenges to leaving? Do you have a place to go? Do you have the resources you need? Who's going to watch the children? Do you have the income? But also your safety. Because what we also know is that the most difficult, the most at risk time for those women experiencing domestic violence, you're at your highest risk when you leave. When you look at some of the cases, a number of women are killed after they left. And women who are experiencing know this. So if I take that jump and I leave, do I have a community of people who will ensure my safety? So, I always like to flip it when people, why didn't they leave? Why didn't they leave? Ask, what are the challenges to leaving? And as we mentioned earlier, domestic violence, it happens across the board. Yes, it happens with men also experience domestic violence. And because of gender stereotypes, it creates a stigma for them to even share. or even be believed by law enforcement. And women are even struggle to be believed by law enforcement. So especially when men report, there's issues with being believed. So I just wanted to share some statistics about um, domestic violence in the Black community in particular. So this is some information from the U.S. CDC, U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and to know that these numbers are probably lower because in our community we are not as likely to report. So Black women are 3 times more likely than white women to experience death as a result of domestic violence. Domestic violence is one of the leading causes of death for Black women between the ages of 15 and 35. More than 40% of Black women will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. This is according to the Institute of Women's Policy Research Status of Black Women in the United States. Most African American and African Caribbean women who experienced lifetime intimate partner abuse reported physical and psychological abuse, and a combination of psychological, sexual, and physical abuse. And I'm just going to pause there for one moment. We often focus on the physical aspects of domestic violence because that is what is the most visible, right? That's the most visible. But domestic violence does incorporate emotional, psychological, as well as spiritual abuse. These are all tactics, whether it's physical, psychological, spiritual, or sexual. These are all tactics of power and control over the other partner. And my colleague Marlon, he often says, the physical aspect of it is generally around 20%. That other 80% is those the other tactics that we often don't talk about, that we often don't look about. And to know that while they're not physical, they're just as important, but they also can manifest physically. They draw your stress up, your anxiety up, right? Your cortisol goes up. That adds on to a number of health implications that we see taking place with those who experience domestic violence. And so, actually, a report from the National Center for Victims of Crime
Straightening out the problem. Thank you, engineer. Because you know what? If we were in church, we would say this, Dr. Elwoodley Johnson, the devil is a liar because we're going to go forth. You can't stop truth. So we're going to continue on, Danielle, with it. But I do have a question to ask you. When we look at domestic violence, is it something that can be inherited from one son to another, from a father to a son, because he sees this? Is it something that a girl can think that this is the way a man is supposed to be treated because she sees the abuse and have never got an understanding? What do you think that to be true? Or do you think people just grow up and just one day they become violent to their wives or spouses?
I think, we're focusing on the family, right? But we have to look at the broader community and the messages we hear from our broader community. That all plays a role in our socialization. There are times when people witness it. I know people who have witnessed it, and then when they grow up and get married, they don't engage in it because of what they witnessed. Right. So I wouldn't take a blanket, but I would like for us to also, but we also do know that when you do witness it, it can also increase the chances that you experience it or you abuse as well. So there is some nuance there, but I want us to think about what are the societal messages? And when we think about our faith communities, what are the messages that we're hearing in our faith communities that can contribute to attitudes? Dr. Johnson, I know you worked with men who were abused. When I talk to men who work with men who do the abusing, do you know what the number one excuse that they pull out is? The Bible.
Well, Danielle, I'd like to answer that question for you.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something. The psychological abuse, from what I experienced, has been the greatest impact, more so than physical. That's where the greatest impact. There are 4 stages of physical and psychological abuse. And when they got to me in the Department of Psychiatry, they were usually in the 3rd or 4th stage, which is just I call it almost to the point where I'm dealing with a zombie. That's why I should call them, because I've gotten a male or a female who've been beaten to the point where they begin to enjoy it, or they think it is their normal. This is a question that really puzzled me for years. How do you enjoy this? How do you endure this? But I found out I saw women specifically who got angry with me. And one even reported me to the administration of Harlem Hospital that I was trying to tear up her marriage because I removed her successfully from the abuser. Do you know, after 2 weeks, they went back to their husbands who was abusing. And when I asked them when they came back beat the next time, I said, well, what happened? He said, well, he loves me. And you don't understand, Mr. Johnson, we have a love relationship, and he don't really mean anything by when he beat me. Now this used to frustrate me, Daniel. I'm gonna be honest with you. I used to just hit myself up against a wall because it didn't make any sense to me. But then domestic violence is not really something you can really make sense out of. It's
Do we want to say domestic violence is a disease?
Most definitely, it is a disease.
Danielle,
it is an addiction.
Back at you.
It's
an
addiction
and an addiction, and that some women or men, but specifically we talk about Black women, actually or think that this is a part of their love language. Would you say that, Danielle? That this is a part of their love language? It's okay if my husband beats me because at the end we make passionate love. So this is a part of our love language. Danielle.
I would say again to look at the societal messages because that plays a big role. And like, for example, do not split your family up. I'm talking about what society, I'm talking about what family says. I'm talking about what faith community says. Do not split your family up. God does not like divorce. So Dr. Johnson, when you took her out, that, I don't know if this is the case, but I'm just
when I took her out, when I took her out of her, when I took her out of her, when I took her out of her so-called comfort zone, that she called it, but really it was her acceptance zone. Because see,
but Greg, let me come in. But what kind of financial economical system that he had over her? That plays a big part too. The finances of him controlling and her not having any accessibility to even have finances to take care of herself.
No, most of these women had jobs. Some of them were financially dependent upon the husband to survive, and they had a lot of kids. But I had a lot of women who were at jobs. A few of them were professionals. They made more money than the husbands did. And they were still beat, and they were still psychologically abused. But
it goes down to, Dr. Johnson, so are you going to say it goes down to power and control?
Power, control, and sickness. It is an addiction. It is an addiction. And what I mean by addiction, it is something that a person psychologically becomes accustomed to. And then when they're not getting this form of abnormal love, they get sick. They start having withdrawals. They get afraid. They get frantic and anxious. They be running around their room. They say, "Oh, I gotta go back. Can I please talk to my husband? Can y'all call him, please?" When she has promised the psychiatrist she would not do that.
But Dr. Johnson and panel, because I'm going to you, Dr. Edward Lee Johnson. When women are in domestic violence and we remove them and put them in safe houses, we also take their children with them. So now you have their children with them, and the children, well, let me tell you something. I would not want to be moved and leave my children behind. Period. But we'll leave that open. But sometimes when the children there, the children could be putting pressure on the parent to see their fathers or whoever it was to go back. And that's, we've seen many people returning basically based on that, because children need, you raise your children in a two family environment. They don't really know what goes on behind closed doors. They don't know that after the husband beats you, he's going to go in and tell you he loves you and give you flowers. So they're only going by what they see. I know a case personally where a person actually called the police on his father, and guess who the parents turned on? Danielle, guess who the parents turned on, Bew? Guess who the parents turned on, Dr. Gregory and Dr. Everly Johnson? Turned on him, because he violated the family, because the police arrested the father. So he was put in the foster home. So it's a lot of dynamics going on. Back at you, Dr. Everly Johnson. What do you think about all this?
Well, as a clinical term, it's called Stockholm syndrome, and this is what we're
Yes, there you go. There you go.
That's what we're describing here, and it's unfortunate, but this issue fundamentally goes to the breakdown of men, the family, but particularly men. Women who comes from strong home with loving father, he can be a great disciplinarian, but he has to know how to balance that with love. Don't fall into the arms of abusive men. So when we fail from the fatherhood aspect, then our children gets left to the wolves, as we would say, to be abused. And so we really have a male problem here. Society has always been dominated by men, and as Gregory mentioned, some of this abuse they've used the Bible to justify it. No different than what slave masters did when they bastardized the Bible and used it to justify chattel slavery. So we're suffering from this social ill and spiritual deficit that's in our community, and that's one of the primary things that I'm doing today, is trying to bring men together, men in particular, so that we can restore foundational covenantal principles that we should have among ourselves, because men are some of the most loneliest people in the world. And believe it or not, these guys who does the abusing, they put up this front like they're so strong, but they're the weakest men on the planet.
Amen. Amen.
Strong,
Amen.
know who they are, know God, will not abuse a woman. So we got weak men who are taking advantage of these women, and that's extremely unfortunate.
Okay. Let me bring Girl Val in. Bew and Don, what do you think about all that you've heard? Don. Okay, Bew, you come in. Come on, Bob. Come in. What do you think about all that you heard?
I mean, it's kind of it's on the point of like talking about, you know, how our problems, like Native American or indigenous people's problems and people of color's problems, are so concisely joined together. I don't really think that people are without ignorance enough to realize that. But when you do this kind of work and you are understanding that a lot of roads crisscross, it's going to be a lot easier to understand, or I should say to not live in that ignorance. In regards to the Bible and all of the religious conversation happening, I think that even in indigenous communities, back then, you know, Christopher Columbus brought, you know, or the colonizers had brought over not only religion, but disease and various other things. Every time a minority is, I don't like saying this word, but conquered, that sounds atrocious, but I don't really know what else I should use, or I should say maybe like taken over would be the proper term, because that's literally what throughout history to like indigenous communities, that they bring their religion over. And I think then when we as minorities, you know, develop it in our own way, there is no show of power that we have. So there is no acknowledgement that we also have the same power. Because when you look at, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, Doctor, was it Bishop?
Johnson.
Bishop Johnson.
Yeah, Bishop
When
Edwards, Bishop Johnson.
Yes.
Bishop Edwards. Yeah, okay. When you brought up the fact that a lot of these white men will be or are afraid, they're very afraid because they have lived in the limelight so long of knowing that they are in control of their own like status in their own lives, and
Yes, they
every
are.
day the reality of, yep, every day and the reality of minorities is that you're not in power, you're not important, and there's nothing you can do about it. That is the message that they are trying to bring to the table. And again, people can deny it all they want, people can, say that that's not the case, but it's true. Everybody is trying to tell somebody something, like subliminally. So there is this idea that, oh, you're going to stay oppressed forever and all of this kind of notion. I'm sick of it because there is such a huge implication that we don't know. Like, oh, you don't know what's going. To be blunt and transparent, that's what everybody needs to start doing. Because if there's blunt and transparency and honesty happening, then the reality of the situation is you're afraid that you're going to lose control and you're going to lose power. And at the end of the day, it's going to crush you if that little pedestal, right, that you will have so, daintily sat yourself on is going to be ripped out from under you. And it's already happening. It's already happening.
Yes. And I don't think,
Ma'am,
Bill, that you're going to get any disagreement from any of the panelists over here. With that statement you said, because as I said, this is war cry. This is war cry for the urban people. And it's time for us to have a voice, and it's time for us to have people that's going to listen. We agree with you. We're glad you're connected to us. We want the Jericho Indians to be connected with us as we move forward. Now, let me just
may
get
I
back.
ask
Daniel.
may I ask the Navajo sister a question?
No, her name.
You
Call her
stated
name. Bew. Tell her your name.
Miss Miss
Bo. Her name is Bo.
Miss Bo, may I ask a question? Um, I've heard you say that you are separated on your reservation, and that I will assume legal government from the United States, they don't cross over into your community to help you. Now, do they treat you like you are American citizens, where you are separated? They can't come onto the reservation because you are Native Americans, or do you feel like you are Americans, that you are entitled to the same treatment and protection under the law?
We are treated exactly like people who are trying to come over from another country. When people are crossing the border, we are treated as the same. We are treated like almost like we don't exist. And then when we have our little problems, so to speak, that's how the government views it. Oh, the Native Americans are mad again. Let's just ignore them. So we are treated as though we don't even exist in America. We're not treated as Americans. We're treated as,
Okay.
yeah, dirt, roaches, rats, whatever, the bottom of the barrel.
Now, Bo, just one question, since Dr. Gregory opened it up. Are there a lot of Native Americans who actually want to leave the reservations and come over in the States? Or is there a lot of Native Americans actually running away because of the tribal customs that govern them? Is that the case?
So within every sort of culture and structure, no matter what race you are, there's always going to be various things that somebody may not like. And within Native American culture, because we hold on so heavily to it, we hold on so heavily to the notion that this is all we have left, right? This is all we have left, and there's really nothing that we have nothing else but our culture and ourselves. So I think that there are some things within Native American culture that are predominantly unlikable. So I do think because of that notion altogether, there is a good amount of people trying to leave the culture and trying to distance themselves from it. There is a very large, it's another conversation, but there is a large amount of women, that are just treated, the way that Native Americans often work is that the gentleman of the household is the primary leader, and the woman is more of the, submissive, subordinate.
Miss Bo, do you realize that this is both a psychological and sociological form of oppression upon your people?
Yes.
Has it been dealt with from your people?
No, no, it has not been dealt with. No.
That's very sad.
Okay. Very sad because your people and our people are so tied in together. You hear us now raising a flag that we want restitution, restitution. And we look at the Native American Indian as getting the land. Now, understanding that it was your land to start with, but we look at it from a point of we gave, you were given the land. They never gave us anything. And here we see that they did give you the land, but there's so many issues that go around. The
Took
government
it
said, well,
back.
you got the land and this is the way it's going to go. Because you now got to have your own hospitals, your own schools, your own food, everything. They gave you the land and pushed you out. So this is a great conversation, and we're going to go into it even farther as we go into War Cry for the next weeks to come. But I want to just go back to Danielle. Danielle, why did you go in this work? Why are you involved in this work?
Well, I mean, that's a long story. It's just things that I saw growing up. I come, as I mentioned to you before, I do practice African spirituality. My mother was Baptist. I went to a Baptist church, Black Baptist church. I went to an all-white Baptist school. So, Pastor Johnson, when you're talking about theology and slavery, I saw that very early on, and I saw the two stark differences growing up. And it's the injustices that I saw in my community, and at times of what I saw, the inaction of my faith community, and what catapulted me towards being an activist and an advocate for social justice is I read the New Testament in its entirety for myself. And our church facilitated it, and it radicalized me to the point where I left church. And then from there, it's a long story on how I've made my other transitions. But I do want to bring up that on this call where we're talking about domestic violence and how domestic violence impacts Black women, one of the temptations is in working with faith communities, there's a variety of temptations when we talk about domestic violence, especially if it happens within the faith community, right? And one of it is to protect the institution, to protect the leader that is engaged in it, but also to blame the victim. And already in this conversation, when we're talking about domestic violence faced by Black women and our disproportionate numbers of victimization, we spend a good portion of this conversation pathologizing survivors. And I just say that I lift that up respectfully, and that it's not even women who have strong fathers can still end up in abusive relationships. And also, I don't see it as a disease. I deal with a chronic disease myself, and I don't see it as a disease. I see it as an oppression. And as I mentioned earlier, and I reflect back to the messages that I had when I was growing up, because we all know your parents can give you that solid foundation, that solid foundation. But the messages that you hear in the church, the messages or in your whatever your faith community is, the messages that you hear in the songs. When I listened to hip hop R&B in the 90s, when you talk about how struggle love is glorified, ride or die chick, that means it don't matter through thick and thin, you're still there. We praise women who stay. They say, "Oh, you're not built like your mothers and grandmothers because you're so quick to leave a relationship." Where at times people are leaving it because there's abuse that's going on. We're told that you're not supposed to leave your partner. You're supposed to submit to a man. Various messages that say somehow that women are of less value as humans, as men. And this is communicated in so many ways. So, and it's important to know that those same ideas, it's not just men being socialized into those ideas, right? This idea of sexism. It's not just men being socialized into it. We are too. And if we aren't active and being critical about it, it does play a role. So I think that that's something, it's something important for me to lift up, is the element of oppression, and then for us to pause before we start to pathologize and focus on why survivors are staying, or they're going back and they're going back. And as service providers, hey, I've been there before. It can be frustrating, right? But that's not the point. That's not the point. We know that when you love someone and they harm you, leaving doesn't make that love go away. That's it. Sometimes we think, oh, when you love someone and they harm you, boom, you're out. That should be second nature. But if we're being honest about it, right, it still doesn't make it any easier. And then so even after survivors leave, the faith community still plays a pastoral care role in their grieving, because they're still grieving the love that was there even after they leave. So that is something that we also talk about when we talk about what does pastoral or spiritual care look like for those who have experienced domestic violence, because some of the teachings can be internalized in ways that can make it very, very difficult. There's a lot of self-blame. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of is God not listening to me? Is God no longer there? Is God punishing me?
Now, Danielle, let me come in with a question. How is the faith-based community, how has their perception been? How has your reception been and going in and getting this information out? Is this a warning? Are they receptive to it? Or have you faced a lot of pushback?
There's a diversity. It's a diversity, right? It really depends on the faith leader and what their disposition is. I mean, I've had doors slammed in front of my face out the get-go. And I've had folks that say, listen, I know I don't know everything. Come in, let's work together. Come in, let's build together. Right? And so there's both things that happens. Whenever you're talking about this, because this issue is so taboo in our communities, because it makes us uncomfortable, right? Because we don't talk about this, but what do you do when someone that you admire and look up to harms someone else? We struggle.
But Danielle, let me come back in again. There's a line of confidentiality. So when you go in and begin to teach this, one of the reason people don't open up is because of trust. It's because of trust.
Yes. And so, we do talk about when we do the trainings, we do talk about confidentiality and trust. But even before you get there, there's just steps that faith communities can take. One is just taking the journey of educating the leadership and the ministers and the congregation about domestic violence. And that means that some things that you may think is truth or you may think is, fact, it may not be the case. So it may be adjusting when you hear new information and therefore adjusting some of the strategy. So taking the opportunity to learn about it, right? And then talking about it, preaching about it. There's a resource for those who are Christian, 100 sermons on domestic violence by sojourners. If you're curious about how do you teach, how do you preach about it, there's an example. Preach about it, get education. And then also, I always say this, because I know what I'm an expert at. I know what I am not an expert at. What I am not an expert at, I'm honest about, and I'll engage in the ministry of referral.
So I have a couple of questions, Danielle. Number one, would you be interested in having a conversation with me offline? And secondly,
definitely.
Okay, so we can exchange information. And secondly, and this goes to all of the women on the panel, is this an experience you guys have had? If it's something you didn't mind talking about, have you had a personal experience with this topic?
Let me go, and then you could go. Not physical abuse, but then there's verbal abuse.
Okay.
And
It's
verbal abuse
psychological.
can be just as harmful as physical abuse, period. Now I'm going to give it over to Bo. Bo, have you had any experience?
Certainly, I've had experience with verbal, physical. Yes.
Hmm. Are you not
Okay.
currently, you were able to get yourself out of the situation though, right?
Yeah, yeah. I haven't been in this situation in a long
Okay.
time.
And then
Because a lot of times, I'm sorry, Pastor, a lot of times we associate it with how many times have he hit you? He only hit you one time. He only hit you two times. See, we're not even getting into that right now. But that after, if you don't stop that first hit, it
one,
can lead up to other things.
one time too many. No
Mhm.
man.
One time's too many. One time's too many. Even verbal abuse. Our music, our drill music is generating and saying verbal abuse of women, calling women derogatory names. The society is saying it's okay to do that. So even our music is saying that it's okay for women to be called. It's okay for women to be called all types of names. Now,
And
Danielle,
women are buying into it. They're buying into it.
Amen.
It's not that
Amen.
women are buying into it.
Well,
Like I said, we're
wait,
all
wait,
being
wait, Danielle.
socialized. We're all being socialized into these cultures. So yes, even as
Yeah.
women, we have to address the sexism within themselves. And I'll
Mhm.
be completely honest. I'll be honest with you. The first time I heard a woman preach, it sounded like nails on the chalkboard. Right? I'm being honest. So when I got to seminary and I had to do reflection, where did that come from? And I'm a woman. How did that even get within me? But if all I saw growing up were male preachers, and it was absolutely unthinkable for a woman to be up at that pulpit, why wouldn't I have that response? Right? So we are also socialized into these cultures. So, yes, you're going to see women who will endorse some of these ideas. Part of the reason
And
why I love this
subscribe
book
to it. Yeah,
is
subscribe to it.
seeing my friends who have gone through this, gone to their to the mothers in the church, and the mothers of the church say, "Well, what did you do to make him hit you?"
Yeah, I know.
Right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then
yeah. Why
so
did you make him mad? Why did you make him mad?
right,
Why
right.
couldn't you just walk away? You know something? All men hit. All men. I've heard men say, you know something? I can understand why a man would hit a woman because a woman can use her tongue so sharp that she can cut a man, and a man will use his strength to strike back at her. And then another thing I want to throw in is that women have used this as a target to hurt men. They call the police. They say he's hitting me when in fact he has not hit. Police comes in and then that causes another problem. So it's a lot of things when we have to look at this whole gamut of domestic violence.
And
Period.
and
Oh,
So
Elder
I would,
Montgomery,
I
to
would
the
add
point
that.
of that, I also want to lift up when Black women are actually harmed and call the police, they are often not assisted the way that they should be. The racism that we experience just being Black people on a day to day impacts the survivor of domestic violence every step of the way. Oftentimes, when they are being harmed and call law enforcement has these stereotypes as Black women as aggressive. They sometimes don't see Black women victims of domestic violence as victims to begin with. And then they experience some of these similar dynamics in the shelter systems as well. So that systemic racism follows that survivor of domestic violence throughout the multiple steps, which compacts the entire experience. So that's something to keep in mind is the additional oppressions that Black survivors of domestic violence face.
So Valerie,
and
Danielle.
then Danielle, I got to come in too. A lot of times when the police comes out, you know what they do? They tell the man to take a walk. They tell him to take a walk. And not like he can't come back into the house. So these are some things. We're gonna go to you, Dr. Edward Johnson, if you had a question, and then Gregory.
I just wanted to say to Danielle, and of course I want to talk with her offline. But I can tell you that the greatest liberator of women of all time was Jesus. If you remember the story in the Bible where they caught this woman in the act of adultery, so they dredged her up to Jesus and told her, well, here's what the law said. What do you say about it? Well, the law said that if a woman is caught in adultery, they both will be stoned. You can't commit adultery by yourself. So these bigoted men, again, this stuff goes back generations and centuries and millenniums with men. When they don't have their head on right for God, then they abuse God's system and take it upon themselves. And so the Bible is there's no fault with the Bible, but it's certainly we got corrupt, weak men who've used that Bible and abused it. And so I want to talk to you about this African spirituality because I'm not familiar with that. So
okay, now I got to throw something in here, Danielle. You and I both was present at this. And when the lady brought up about Hannah being violated mentally by Sarah and what Abraham did when he pushed her away. So when we look at it, we don't just look at the portion where the woman with the adultery. Also in the Old Testament, there's a scripture, a parable about a woman that was cut up into 12 pieces in the Bible. So domestic violence is embedded inside of scripture as well. And so that's why the church.
That's the Old Testament, though. As I said, Jesus is the greatest liberator of all time. He came to clean up all that old stuff that we find in the Old Testament. So we got some solace in Christ, and we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
No. Yeah, you're right, Dr. Edward Lee Johnson. But guess what? What Paul did and what he said about women also when he said a woman should not talk. So let's just throw it all out there. We're going to open it up.
You have to put all that in perspective. And again, this is another whole subject altogether.
Yes, it's another subject. And we're glad to even start the conversation about it as well. I just want to talk to Bo and I want to talk to Don about children running away. Why are you so passionate for this? Especially since not all the time can you help the children on the reservation. You are helping others as well. What's your passion, Bo?
My passion is to help others because I was not helped myself. I think it is very important to recognize that.
Well, let me ask a question. Let me come in and ask a question. Why were you not helped?
Because I was failed by the system. At one point I was in foster care, and then I kind of just bebopped around a lot, and I was failed by the system. I was never really given the opportunity to receive any sort of help, and I feel as though that a lot of the people that are in activism kind of work are angry at the system for failing them, or angry at law enforcement, at the foster care system, at families, or I wasn't given the opportunity I wasn't given a light. I wasn't given a flashlight to point down the dark hallway to the door to get out of what I was in. I did not see the light at the end of the tunnel. I didn't see it when I was a child and a teenager. I didn't see it. And I think I want others to be able to see it, because if they can't.
Now, let me ask you a question. I need to ask a question now. Did you see domestic violence in your parents or in your community when growing up?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Was that one of the reasons, maybe because it was acceptable, that you accepted it and did not try to move quicker to get out of it? Could that have been it?
Well, I mean, I was like a very young child at the time, so there wasn't really a lot of resources that I had or even knew about to be able to get out of it. Because when I turned, older, as I got older, when I was a teenager, I was pulled out of it. But most of the abuse happened when I was very, very young, like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, up until I was like 13, 14. And it never really kind of occurred to me that there were resources out there to be able to help. So.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for sharing that because most of us have experienced some type of violence in our families that we don't want to speak about. We know we have uncles or cousins that have actually hurt people in our families that it's been taboo and we can't even talk about. And we don't want to go and speak about those things, but those things should have been spoke about then. But unfortunately, the resources was not in place. I thank you guys. I salute you guys for coming on. Please, Bo, tell us about this candlelight visual, which I will be at. I will be there at with you guys. Yes. Danielle, you coming, Danielle? Yeah, we're gonna be on the front line, opening up our mouth. So tell us something about that, Bo. I'm glad I'll see you then.
So the candlelight vigil is a project that I am honored to be a part of because it is not only healing for me to be able to honor people that have been failed or have not been found or various reasons that are still missing. I think it is so important to have a collective time of healing where everybody can come together and I don't want to say be sad, but be upset, be kind of reminiscent on who these people, who these young girls and women were, and I think it's very important to have that sort of camaraderie. It will be held on November 3rd. And as you can see, it's on the flyer. It's at City Hall Park. It's near the fountain. We're going to have some speakers coming. So I will be one of them. So hopefully everybody can join. I look forward to the experience. And I think spearheading the project, like Miss Rowe has given me a lot of room to do a lot of the work. And I feel as though she is kind of trying to set me up to, not more of a leadership role, but to do a lot of planning for a specific event, like for the future. It has been a very rewarding experience. And as I stated, I am very honored to be able to experience something that I am putting a lot of heavy work into. And I like seeing the results. So I think the results, when it all comes together, I think I would be very.
Yeah. And we salute you and we honor you today for your work. Just one thing before we even move on. Tell us how close the bill is to being passed in Albany.
So the bill has been passed in both houses. So it's sitting on the governor. It's sitting on the governor's desk and it's waiting approval. There have been some other bills she has passed very recently within the past couple of weeks about sex trafficking and domestic violence and all that kind of stuff. She has yet to even make any notion that she has responded to it. There needs to be some sort of emergent press conference held because of the fact that we are not receiving any feedback. She's acknowledging a lot of the same subjects that crisscross over, but we are trying to get it to go up as many signatures as possible. So obviously on the screen here, you can see that there is a petition on change.org. We're trying to get it to 1,000 signatures to build support. You could sign it, you could share it. It would be great. So we can get her to actually pass it through because it is imperative. Like she's looking, Governor Hochul is looking at all of these various bills, right, that are in coordination or crisscross over with various activist topics that, plague New York. So I think it's kind of like you need to be held accountable. It's understandable that, there is so much to do, but it has to be looked at. It has to be passed. It has to be. There is no New York especially is such a place where a lot of these issues plague it, and there should have been something come up sooner. Thankfully, Ms. Roll has taken the responsibility on her shoulders to the monumental responsibility to try to serve New York for the better and for people of color. And it is a very commendable thing because in New York has a lot of issues, and the system has failed minorities for decades. And if something is not done, nothing is going to be done. And Ms. Rowe
Absolutely.
Ms. Rowe is working tirelessly to to see it put through. So we need that, all that hard work to not be put up in vain.
Now, one of the things that was disturbing to me, because War Cry is partnering with you, is that we could not get, we was limited in the signatures. You know, and it's amazing that we don't have so many of us black and brown women and even men, young and old, signing this petition. This petition, I don't care where you live at. You could be in Arkansas, you could be in South Carolina, you could be in Georgia, you could be in Arizona. We just want you to sign the petition. We should have had thousands of signatures on this petition, and we still have not reached that mark. So please, listeners, I've sent it out to over 250 people. I've asked you to share. Please sign the petition, because it is one that is very needed. Our black and brown girls are going missing. And guess what? Nobody's looking for them. Nobody's looking for them. Some of them are being human trafficked. Some of them are being killed for various reasons, taken into domestic violence situations. Some are being sold on the slave market. We've got to stand up and say something. If not now, when something happens to you, no, we got to speak up for the least, because that's our requirement for Christianity too. We talk about we are Christians, but when it comes to people who are being marginalized, we shut our mouths up. Now is the time. Sign the petition. Put it on Facebook. Sign the petition. Give it to your neighbors. I've even ask them to send me some paper petitions. I got people in Brooklyn walking up and down their blocks getting paper petitions to sign. If you're afraid of the internet, you think somebody's collecting your information, which I don't know why, because they're not asking you for that. Sign the petition. We need to move forward. And Governor, we want you to sign it. Governor, we want you to sign it. Because guess what? There's going to be another election, and we're going to remember. Danielle, your last closing remarks.
Yes, so thank you for all that information, Bu, and we look forward to supporting as well. So this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so I just wanted to leave some final words, or what are some things that faith communities can do. And the first and foremost is that you can make a public pronouncement declaring that domestic violence is a moral and a spiritual problem, and the need for faith communities to prevent it. And then you can teach, preach, and share. Again, for the Christians, if you just Google 100 sermons on domestic violence, that is by the Sojourners. And I was going to add the Old Testament stories that talk about domestic violence. It's not to condone it, but the message is this is not the way. So there's good nuggets in the Old Testament, good nuggets, as Pastor Johnson was saying, with Jesus and how Jesus championed women in the New Testament. Another thing is to collaborate with domestic violence organizations for congregational awareness and programming and education activities. These organizations are ready to collaborate with you. Just check for your local organizations. They generally get excited when faith communities outreach, and they'll be happy to show up with information and resources. And also, share information on where to seek help with your congregation. Mount Lebanon Baptist Church in Brooklyn, they actually have a printout sheet of resources that they put in all of the bathrooms in the congregation. So if people don't want to talk about it, or maybe they the confidentiality issue, well, here's a confidential number that you can call. Here's a shelter, and here's a hotline. And then
wait, now I got to ask a question. How can we connect with you?
Yes. So you can reach me at, my email is, so my name is Danielle Williams. I'm at Connect NYC, and the website is www.connectnyc.org. My email is dwilliams@connectnyc.org. And that's the best place to reach with me, to reach out to me and collaborate. I'm willing to share any information or resources, and even connect you to other faith leaders who are also leading on these issues. We do have faith leaders even within the city who've been very passionate about DV, who are more than welcome to open themselves to support other faith leaders working on this as well.
Thank you, Dr. Ewerly Johnson.
Valerie, let me just have last words. I'm kind of over my time. I'm celebrating my 60th birthday today. And
happy birthday!
Thank you. 69 going on 45.
Can you feed us some cake? We want cake.
They ate it all yesterday at church. They gave me a whole big old pan and ate it all. So I figured something out. But I'm really enlightened by this topic. As I said, I was not that abreast of it, but I'm certainly happy for the last two sessions. And I do want to have a follow-up with you, Valerie. Danielle, I got your number, so I'm going to call you. I'll text you, find out a good time. And thank you guys for having me on. To our listeners, please, let's just join this movement so that we can help clean up some of this mess Satan has put in our world. We're not fighting flesh and blood, but we're fighting powers and principalities, rulers of the darkness, and spiritual wickedness in high places. And yes, that's in churches as well. So we got our work cut out for us. Go
all right.
Book, Autopsy of Slavery. You can go to Amazon.com and get this book. It's only $16, and I'm promising you there's nothing like it on the market. Love you guys. See you next round.
Love you, Dr. Gregory Johnson. Your last words, Dr. Gregory Johnson. Then we're off the air, and I thank everybody. 11 o'clock next week, Dr. Gregory Johnson.
It's a pleasure being here. To Miss Bo, my Navajo sister, I heard you and I feel you. Trust me, I heard you, and I'll be praying for you. I heard you distinctively, and I will definitely be praying for you. Have a good day.
Yes, we will. And we are connected together. This is War Cry. We're not politically corrected, but we are Christ directed. And we bring people together. It's about improvement. This is an urban radio station. And I'm glad Women Power was on the line today. Thank you, Bo. We're with you. I'll see you on November the 3rd. And we've got to talk about some things. Danielle, you know my girl, Dr. Edward Lee Johnson. He's with us, Dr. Gregory Johnson. And we're going to move forward. This is War Cry. See you next week. This is War Cry. We're on the wall crying out for our children, our communities, our schools, our churches, our families. This is War Cry. Welcome to our reality. Gun violence. Chicago, Philly, Detroit, New York, Atlanta, just to name a few. Our black children are dying day by day. This is War Cry. Police brutality. Hands up. Don't move. I can't breathe. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. Hashtag All Lives Matter to Christ. This is War Cry. Drugs, rape, mass shootings, school violence. This is War Cry, galvanizing people to pray for our children and to take action. Let's march on Washington. We want prayer back in you. This is War Cry, candles, memorials in every corner in our neighborhood. Who died this weekend? Oh no, not Miss Martha's grandson. This is War Cry. He was only 16. His brother died last year. He was only 13. This is War Cry. We the people. We're the elected officials. This is War Cry. We need the church. Where's the church? Only on Sundays. Get to the streets, church. We need you out there. This is War Cry. Girl, be gone. Boy, be gone. Mothers crying. Fathers being locked up. Welcome to our reality. Identity crisis. This is War Cry. Oh, they're trying to remove our history off the textbook. Oh, critical race theory? It makes them feel bad. It's our reality. Fake reality shows. We want the real truth. Stay woke. This is War Cry. HBCUs under attack. This is War Cry. Equal pay for what we do. We want a reparation. This is War Cry. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Wait a minute. Is that somebody else they're burying that looks like us? Only 12. This is War Cry. Oh, let us come together and pray for our young people, pray for our communities, pray for our schools, pray for our churches, pray that the government gives us what we need, a fair opportunity. This is War Cry, home of the brave, land of the free. Who's free? Our men are locked up. This is war prayer. Hashtag mothers against gang violence. Hashtag fathers who love their sons. Hashtag what would Jesus do? This is war cry.
I know who goes before me.